So it's this free flow of people, this free flow of ideas that has really vaulted higher education to the forefront. We have the Athenaeum, which is a faculty club, and one of them is the Einstein Suite, which is where Einstein stayed. If you put your head down on the pillow and shut your eyes, perhaps by osmosis you will learn a bit of what Einstein was thinking about. My job is to make sure that Caltech remains the place where the best young people want to come to realize their dreams. And you want them to feel that at Caltech they can do something that they can't do anywhere else in the world. Hello, ni hao. I'm Thomas Rosenbaum. I'm president of the California Institute of Technology and a professor of physics at Caltech. This is actually my first time in Taiwan, and it's a great pleasure to join you here.
让我们一起欢迎加州理工大学的校长，欢迎 Mr. Rosenbaum. President, welcome. Have a seat, please. President, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Taiwan and join us.
Yes, it's a great pleasure.
No, it's a precious opportunity for all of us to have you here. Yeah, first let me introduce to our audience in Taiwan and overseas Chinese. Sure. I think most of us have already known that Caltech is a worldly known university, famous for your research, science research. Mm-hmm. And you have been taking this position as president of Caltech for more than 4 years?
That's correct.
This is the fifth year.
Yes, started my fifth year.
Oh, okay. So first, I would like to know, within your more than 4-year experience, do you really see a absolutely distinct boundary between social and human science and the natural science?
Not at all. In fact, I try to tell our students, whether they really understand it at this age, I'm not sure, but I try to tell them that in fact they'll be better scientists if they get a full education in terms of the humanities and the social sciences. Reading novels, going to plays, lets you step outside of your experience, lets you develop empathy, lets you think about problems in a different way, and that makes you a better scientist. I think from the humanities perspective, also, given the technological challenges in society today, knowing something about science is very important. So I think a good education, in fact, involves all these approaches to life to become a well-rounded individual and citizen.
Yeah. President, we all know that Caltech is always ranked on the top 10 list. Actually, some of my colleagues told me now it's top 5 list of the world universities. So again, within your full experience, what is the most prominent feature of this university, Caltech?
What impresses me most about Caltech is that people are fearless. They are unafraid to try new things, to try to solve problems that may seem impossible now, but if you solve them, will change the world. And that's very much in the culture. There's a lot of cooperation, a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion, people challenging each other to do this. And I think if you keep that part of the culture strong, you'll be fine.
President, in this long-standing university, in your leadership, what is your core value to lead the whole faculties and all the students?
So it's a very good question. It's always hard to boil things down to just one value. But what I've learned, both as provost at the University of Chicago and now as president of Caltech, is that you're put into situations where you're asked questions where you don't know the answer, where there are issues that come up that you may not even understand the questions. And so what you have to do is figure out two things. One is, what are the principles that are at stake? You always want to be comfortable having the moral high ground. And the second part is to figure out the process. That is to be able to make sure that people are heard, that you're transparent about how you're making a decision, and that you let them know. It doesn't mean you have to do what they're telling you to do or asking you to do, but you do have to listen and explain. And I think if you get the principles right and the process right, then you have the strength to move on in a way that will be sustainable.
President, I believe the core value you just shared with us reflects the right directions that most universities in the States pursues. I think American higher education does influence the whole world. So from your perspective, what is the most significant contribution that nowadays American higher education keeps on benefiting the humanities progresses?
I think the ability to ask questions that matter, but not only that, to realize that it's the questions that are more important than the answers, that changes the way people think about the world around them, that's the most important thing you can do, even if you don't know the answer right now. And if you create knowledge for the ages, that's wonderful. But I think the other part that we're seeing more and more in American higher education, but I think across the world actually, is that people who are discovering these things want to influence society. They want to make people's lives better. And so not only do we create knowledge for the ages, but we are also solving problems that affect society today.
Yes. Well, President, I have read your inauguration speech in 2014 with an emphasis on diversity. Let me quote some of the speech. Quote your words. An absolute commitment to excellence in the need for diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of experience. With its faculty, students, and over 100 years of history, how does Caltech implement diversity?
Diversity is a strategy for excellence. It is not an add-on. The idea is that talent is blind. Talent is distributed across people throughout the world. It's distributed for men and women. Doesn't matter what your race is, what your creed is, what your ethnicity is. There are going to be talented people all around. And so if you want to be the best in the world, you need to be attractive. You need to be a destination of choice to everyone. And if you are not diverse, I would argue manifestly you haven't been successful in attracting the best people in the world. And so a lot of places think about this as something you do on the side. But I think it's very important, and certainly at Caltech, it's my belief that Caltech will not be the best place in the world. I mean, we want to be the best. Obviously, there are lots of great places across the world, unless it attracts people from around the world, people who look different from each other. But it's not only looking different from each other. It's also that people who have different life experiences bring different perspectives to a problem. And so if you have teams of people who think about problems from different angles, you're much more likely to come up with a creative solution. And they've done studies in industry that demonstrate this. And so diversity is important in securing the truth. That is, how you create knowledge is that you have arguments in the good sense, where you actually listen to other people and are open to changing your view. And when you have this clash of ideas, that's how you learn something new, how you create knowledge. And if you have people who come from different perspectives and bring that to bear, ask different questions, which is what we were talking about, then you're able to create knowledge much more efficiently and much more effectively. And so that's how I think about diversity for Caltech, and I think for all organizations. This is a universal kind of truth, I believe.
Yeah, President, but allow me to propose my next question.
Sure.
When we talk about diversity,
Yeah.
but somehow under the administration of President Trump's government, it seems to us that making America great again seems to contradict to our image of a nation that has been always embracing diversity and tolerance. Would you like to share your thoughts on this very controversial phenomenon?
Well, I think that if you look at the history of America, that it has benefited enormously from the talent that has come from abroad. So here's an interesting fact, just one of many in this area. So if you look at the Nobel Prizes in science, that's physics, chemistry, and medicine, that have been won by Americans, 40% of them have been won by Americans who were born abroad. Oh, really? So it's one indication of the kind of talent that's come to America and that's changed the country, that's changed the world. And so I think it is extraordinarily important to continue this for America's future and the world's future. Now, I want to be careful to say as well that I think one of the things that America contributes, that higher education in America contributes to the world, is that we educate individuals who then go out and return to their countries and help their own countries. Some stay in America, some go away. Of course, some Americans go abroad, and that's extremely important for education for our citizens as well. And so it's this free flow of people, this free flow of ideas that has really vaulted higher education to the forefront in America and elsewhere. And I think if we look towards the future, it's really the only stable way to continue this sort of excellence. So I'm very keen to see that continue, and I think that we've been enriched as a society because of this flow of people and ideas.
I heard even Einstein had taught
Yes.
in Caltech. Why? For how long?
So he came and visited in the 1930s. Robert Millikan, who was one of the founders of modern Caltech, who was also a Nobel laureate in physics, the famous Millikan oil drop experiment, measuring the charge on the electron. I can never resist giving a physics lesson when I have the opportunity. So I hope your listeners will forgive me for that. And Einstein came and visited. He was very interested as well in the 1920s, of course, about the effects of general relativity on the motion of Mercury, and we ran a big telescope. Caltech has always run the biggest telescopes, optical telescopes in the world.
Yes.
And so there was a natural connection that way. In fact, when Einstein left Germany, he had an offer to come to Caltech, and he had an offer to go to the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. Wow. Unfortunately for Caltech, he chose Princeton, I think in part because it was closer to Europe, and it wasn't quite as easy to travel in those days as it is now.
Of course.
But he was very much a part of the fabric of Caltech for those years. And if you come and visit Caltech, we have the Athenaeum, which is a faculty club where people get together. And we have rooms where you can stay. And one of them is the Einstein Suite, which is where Einstein stayed when he was at Caltech. So if you put your head down on the pillow and shut your eyes, perhaps by osmosis, you will learn a bit of what Einstein was thinking about.
Oh, it was still kept as a time machine?
Yes, that's right,
that's
exactly.
Very interesting.
So we have a time machine of a sort.
So, President, would you like to introduce to our audience what is the essence of the curricular design of Caltech that would both promote the social, spiritual, and also the technological progresses?
Right. So I think there are two major elements of the curriculum at Caltech. The first is captured by the core. So everybody who comes into Caltech has to learn physics, math, chemistry, computer science, biology, engineering.
Okay.
And the students all share the same curriculum during their first year with small changes. So
that sounds very heavy.
It is very heavy. We work our students extremely hard. But no matter what they choose to do, and it can be in science or outside of science, they develop quantitative skills which allow them to solve problems. And they have the background that they can bring to bear the concepts of these major scientific and engineering fields to whatever pursuit they are going ahead with. And so the core is very important. It It is not only the curricular part of it, it's also the interactions, the doing the problem sets together, the creation of community in that fashion. And then, of course, they go on and they specialize. You know, we have a 3-to-1 faculty-student ratio.
Wow.
So if you come to Caltech, there's no excuse. You should do research. It may not be the research that you're going to do in your career, even if you're an academic. And if you're not an academic, you probably wouldn't be doing research, although, of course, in industry you can, and do very formidable research. But this lets you create knowledge or see what the process is about creating knowledge. It's not solving a problem where you know the answer. It's much different, but it's a different sort of reward. And so for all our students, all of them essentially do research in the summer. We have a summer undergraduate research fellowship program, and we encourage them to talk to faculty members and just find a spot in a laboratory. Then you form your own mini family in a research group. You meet the graduate students, you meet the postdocs, you learn from the faculty members. And so it's a very stabilizing influence as well. It's the essence of what a Caltech education is and should be.
Yes. President, higher education in the States needs sufficient, or let's say abundant, financial support.
Yes.
Recently, I've read an article, actually it's an in-depth coverage from the States. It pointed out that nowadays the average American college graduate carries the burden of student schooled loan debts up to $40,000 US dollars. That's very heavy. I would like to hear your thoughts on this phenomena. How do you think about this heavy burden on the average, especially local American student?
Right. So I think this is really a challenge of higher education to make it affordable for students. Having said that, there are very different segments of higher education. So Caltech is a need-blind institution. What that means is that we admit our students without looking at their ability to pay, and then we provide support for them so they can afford to come. And there are about 60 such institutions in the United States. So it's not many, but we're one of those. And so our students don't have a large debt burden in that fashion.
I see.
A number of them have to work part-time in terms of doing a research assistantship or teaching or something like that as part of their package. But we really try to make it possible for students to come out without large amounts of debt. And also, essentially, all our students get good, high-paying jobs, so that there's not an issue in that fashion. However, that's not true for all institutions of higher education in the United States, and the statistics you're talking about are important that way. There are a lot of for-profit institutions where students actually don't graduate and don't get jobs and yet still owe a lot of money, and that's really not right in a lot of ways. And there are other parts of American higher education, particularly in the public sector, which is less expensive, but where state legislatures are not providing as much support as they historically have. And since students are really pushed and tuition is going up, which means that they have to take out loans. And I think it's a real challenge. And you put your finger on a major challenge, because when we were talking earlier about diversity and talent,
That's right.
talent does not depend on how much money your family makes. And so we want to make sure that all the talented students have the opportunity then to get an education and that this not be a barrier. So we've made some progress, I think, in America in this way, but there's more progress to be made.
Yeah. As a private university, Caltech has been running very well. I would like to know how supportive your alumni across the world in terms of alumni donations.
Yeah, our alumni have been terrific. Now, we don't have a lot of alumni. We're so small. There are only 23,000 living alums.
How many in Taiwan?
You know, I don't know exactly, but we had an event last night with 45 people, and it's great. It speaks to the talent in Taiwan, for sure.
Please continue.
Yes, and so the alumni of Caltech have been extremely generous. But I think it's the kind of support they're offering that's the most noteworthy. So what alums understand about part of the secret of Caltech, which we've been talking about, is the ability to take risks, to try something that may not work, but is important. And to do that, you generally don't get government funding. So we seed those efforts with private funding, many of which are given by alums and others by other philanthropists who are not connected with Caltech. And that lets us try something out and prove whether it's going to work or not. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, because if you weren't taking risks, then everything would work. And so our alums have been pivotal in positioning Caltech to make great discoveries. So the discovery of gravitational waves is a wonderful example of that. Wow. Where we had support from foundations and our endowment to actually build the first prototype in the 60s when it seemed almost impossible that you could actually detect gravitational waves. And then it was taken up in a glorious way by the National Science Foundation, largest project funded, well over $1 billion, over 40 years. And of course, as you know, a couple of years ago, made the first direct detection of gravitational waves, listened to the universe in a new way, and is telling us a lot about the world, the universe around us.
Yes, but President, talking about alumni and faculties,
yes.
I would like to congratulate Caltech that by the 4th of October, the Nobel Prize winner, Caltech has 38.
That's
now
correct.
38
That's correct.
Nobel Prize winner, to its number, awarded to 22 alumni.
That's correct.
The item was chemistry this year?
This year, Frances Arnold won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. It was, in some ways, a very Caltech prize in that what she won the award for was something called directed evolution. I think the Nobel citation talked about the revolution in evolution. And so she's a chemist. And she was trying to create new sorts of enzymes. And trying to do that chemically by standard means was very frustrating and very slow. And she came up with the brilliant idea that in biology, in nature, evolution is how we try different combinations. So instead of trying to mix things together in the lab, could she somehow figure out how to use evolution to help chemistry? And she did that. She engineered various proteins and changed their constituency. The proteins make the enzymes. And that she then figured out how to watch them evolve and figure out which ones were the most effective for what she wanted. For example, making pesticides that don't harm the environment, or catalysts that make industries work better, chemical reactions proceed faster. And so it was taking insight from one field and putting it to work in another field, and then not being afraid that trying something that other people hadn't tried might not work. So it was hard, but it worked, obviously, and she won the Nobel Prize. So per person, per faculty member, per alumnus, or alumna, Caltech has by far the largest number of Nobel Prizes when normalized that way.
So Caltech is definitely a doctorate granting research university.
Yes.
We can say that.
Yes.
So except the finance we just talked about, President, what else are the other challenges you see for this university to face in order to keep up to excellence?
Right, and this is in some ways asking me what my job is, right? And so I look at my job as to make sure that Caltech remains the place where the best young people, well, the best people in general, but in particular the best young people, want to come to realize their dreams. You want them to dream big, and you want them to feel that at Caltech they can do something that they can't do anywhere else in the world. And that, again, is a lot about the environment. And they feel that the resources, the conversations, the support are such that Caltech can do something special. Because we're small, what are our leverage points? So we run the Jet Propulsion Laboratory for NASA. So we send all those robots to Mars that are walking on the surface. We send probes that are now not even in the heliosphere, have left the sun's orbit and are going into interstellar space. So you can ask these sorts of questions that you can't do anywhere else. Scientists about earthquake engineering and earthquake detection, So we run a earthquake network up and down the West Coast to be able to collect data to do something special in terms of, and we try to collect the people who are interested in taking those risks, as we were talking about. So that's my job. It's a simple one. And not everyone is able to find the kind of educational experience that will let them do the best in life, and I think that's a real challenge for us. I think there are also issues about the value of the humanities. That was the first question that you asked me. There's some feeling that the purpose of a higher education is to get a job, and I don't want to dismiss that. I mean, it is extremely important that we give our students the ability so that they can usefully work through life, and that's an important part. But it's not all that an education is about. You want to educate the future citizens of the country. You want people to develop passions so that they have satisfying lives in that fashion. You want them to try new things and to continue to learn throughout their lives. And a good education will do that. We're a science and engineering place, and so our students go to a good job market, and as I said, but that's wonderful, but there are many people who make extraordinarily valuable contributions to society who have very different sorts of education or educational interests and backgrounds, and making sure that that's honored is a challenge for us, not only as educators, but as society.
43% of Caltech students are Asian.
Yes, that's the reflection, I think, of the merit criterion trumping everything else. And we're also located in California, in a region where there's a large Asian American population. I think that contributes in terms of our applicant pool. We don't use race or gender or anything else as a criterion.
I see. President, there is an association, Student for Fear Association in the States this year, actually this summer, accused Harvard University systematically discriminating Asian Americans by using some kind of racial quota and constantly granting the Asian Americans lower personality quality ratings.
Right.
It's very controversial. Would you like to share your thoughts with us on this matter?
So I can't comment expertly.
Of course.
The suit is against Harvard. I frankly don't know the details of their admissions processes. I can tell you, though, about how Caltech thinks about it. When we do admissions, and we take 6% last year of the applicants who apply to us, so we have a large pool of students. A lot more of those that get in could do well at Caltech, but we have limitations because we try to stay at a small size, is that we look first and foremost for merit. We don't really care about your background or anything else. We're interested in what your contributions have been and will be in science and engineering, and in the STEM fields, and you know, as a curious human being. And then we look at people holistically. We don't just look at their test scores. We don't just look at their whatever these arbitrary rankings are. We don't look at necessarily, I mean, we look at their grades, but not only that. We look at everything and try to understand who the person is. So it's very important to look comprehensively and holistically at each student. But we're very careful to have multiple readers of every case, so it's not one person making a decision, and go through, and then we do the best we can in that fashion. Where the challenge is, I think, for us, is that we want to, well, for all of us, in terms of admissions, is we want to be able to create the pool. That's where you want to get the diversity. You want to get everybody interested in Caltech or Harvard or Yale or whatever, Stanford, whatever it might be, or Ohio State University, and have them apply so that your pool is diverse, and then you just use merit then once you've created the diverse pool. And so that's the kind of approach we've taken to create our student body.
Yeah, actually, on my data, 43% of Caltech students are Asians.
Yes.
Wow, the rate is pretty high.
It is. We as it turns out, we have more Asian Americans than we do most of our peers. But that's the reflection, I think, of the merit criterion trumping everything else. And we're also located in California, in a region where there's a large Asian American population. I think that contributes in terms of our applicant pool. But we don't have quotas. We don't use race or gender or anything else as a criterion for admissions. But certainly, it appears that Asian American families value education in a way that is really wonderful. And those values are transmitted to their kids, obviously. And I think that presumably there are all kinds of sacrifices that are made to position their children in a way that being successful in terms of their education receives the right sort of help and feedback. And all our students are driven, if you will, in that way to learn, and Asian American students are just part and parcel of that community.
Yes. President, we talk about diversity today.
Yeah.
People with diverse cultural background enhances the charms of American culture. Your grandfather had stayed in China for not a short period of time in a refugee that accommodate people without ID paper.
Correct.
Having knowing ancestor traveling overseas in that situation, what is the significance for you?
Yeah, so you're referring to my grandparents who left Germany very late, Nazi Germany, were Jewish, and so they had to leave if they were going to survive. My grandfather's parents were old and couldn't leave, and that's one reason they stayed so late. So they wound up going from Berlin to Moscow and then across Siberia on the Trans-Siberian Railroad to Vladivostok, and then Shanghai, because there was a fight between the Japanese and the Allies. You actually did not need papers to get into it. So it was one of the few places you could get in without the proper papers. So they spent the war in Shanghai. My mother had been sent on a kinder transport earlier to England, so she went to England, spent the war in England, came to the United States just actually after Roosevelt died. My father's also German Jewish, and his family, they escaped via Palestine. My parents didn't know each other. They met in the United States and then came there. And this is a somewhat common story for German Jews, of course, who were fortunate enough to get out.
A story of time.
Yeah, it's a story of time that way. But to your question, it makes one appreciate a number of things. It makes you appreciate the United States and the fact that it welcomed people from around the world. And I'm very grateful to the United States that way and those ideals, and why I'm concerned that those ideals continue. It makes you recognize and appreciate that there are good people around the world. They're bad people, they're good people, but you see in terms of being welcomed into Shanghai that was certainly a very positive aspect as well. And it makes, I think, you shouldn't take things for granted. That is, you can be part of a very good situation. I mean, German Jews were assimilated into society in Germany for a long time. Both my grandmother and grandfather on my father's side were doctors. My grandfather, who wound up in Shanghai, was a lawyer, so they were educated, they were contributing to society. And yet, if you don't pay attention, things can change. So it's also a lesson about being involved with society and trying to make sure that these lessons are not forgotten. And so it's been very powerful. I mean, some of these relate to universities, of course, but a lot of it's just about life and one's responsibility as a citizen.
Now, would you like to extend your elaboration on the 5 elements which you have always emphasized on? Actually, you call it intellectual magic. Those are excellence, ambition focus, intimacy and perspective.
Right. Well, thank you. So I was talking specifically in that about Caltech, which has a somewhat different model than our peers, but I think some of the lessons are more generalizable, but some of them are specific to Caltech. In the sense of focus is something that's very important at Caltech, because we've made the decision basically not to grow. So we don't want to get bigger, we want to get better. So what that means is that you have to constantly choose which area you're going to invest in. What intellectual areas can you be the best in the world or among the best in the world? And how do you then apply your resources to do that? And because we have finite resources and only 300 faculty members and only 1,000 undergraduates and 1,250 graduate students.
You emphasize only for our audience in Taiwan, so that is a very small amount of number compared to other, we call Ivy League university in the States.
So for example, MIT, which is the closest to us, is 5 times our size.
Okay, I see.
So, or University of Chicago, where I spent most of my career before moving to Caltech, now has 7,000 undergraduates, and that's relatively small. Ohio State probably has 50,000 undergraduates, or Michigan. So we're small that way. And what that means is that you have to make these decisions about what areas are the most promising ones. And that's always easy. The hard part is what don't you do and what you stop doing once you've started it. And so that's the focus aspect of it. And I think that's a valuable lesson, but it's particularly acute. And we sometimes will go years before we hire someone once we announce a search at the faculty level. But it might be that the right person isn't available or interested in you for 5 years or 7 years. And so we have the patience then to say that the excellence is what matters. We don't need to fill the spot for the sake of filling the spot. Excellence is what matters in terms of admitting our students as well. Ambition is a very important part because I think you always, in a good sense, you want people to be humble, but you want them to be ambitious in the sense that they want to accomplish great things. They want to work hard to accomplish those things. They want to think of big ideas. They want to think about, can I create a new way of, you don't want just the little next step. And so that's a cultural attribute, as we were talking about before, because that has to be reinforced by everybody in the environment. Whether it is that you're trained in engineering and then you do a problem in biology, or whether it is that you're thinking about an approach, you're reading James Joyce or whatever it might be, and it lets you think about a problem in a different way. Or you've gone to the theater, or you've done music, and what you've learned there in terms of the pattern recognition, if you will, lets you be a better scientist. Of course, it probably makes you a happier human being, so that that may even be more important. But I think that aspect of it is acutely important. And for our undergraduate education, of course, we talked about the core, but we also require all our students every quarter to take a course in the humanities of the social sciences.
That's a requirement?
As a requirement. So we want to do, and we require them to take a certain number of courses in terms of writing, because being able to express your ideas is a very important part, no matter what you do in life. So that's the perspective part of it. So I think if you get all those right, you have a wonderful environment, right? Then you have the magic. Now, so that's what we try to do.
President, you graduated from Harvard and receiving your PhD degree in Princeton.
That's correct.
And now you are leading Caltech.
Yes.
So in your experience, I think you can share with how does a good academic atmosphere really enhances students to be more and more self-motivated.
Right. So I was very fortunate to go to a number of excellent places. But I would say in terms of motivation and the excitement of learning, I actually learned that at a different place, which was related to my Princeton experience. So I actually did my graduate work at Bell Laboratories in Murray Hill, which is a storied industrial research center. It's where the transistor was invented, where a lot of the optical communications were developed. And so when I was a graduate student, I actually spent my time at Bell Labs doing the research actually on metal insulator transitions and doped silicon, so semiconductor work. And this was a time in the basic research part, it was unbelievably free in terms of exchange of ideas. It was unbelievably challenging. People just wanted to learn and to solve problems. There were about 100 PhDs in the basic science. I was way on the bottom of the totem pole. I was just a student, and there weren't many students there actually. But the intellectual excitement just made you want to do this science. It made you want to push yourself really hard. And when you're a graduate student, it's a privileged time because you actually can dive into a problem without distraction. And so being at Bell was unbelievable. Now, of course, I probably should give credit to Harvard and Princeton as well in terms of that way. And then I left Bell to go to University of Chicago primarily because I wanted to have students. And I wanted to be an educator in that sense, a mentor to students. And that you couldn't do at Bell Labs. But the interaction, the collaboration, the challenge was very similar. But I think I really learned that part at Bell Labs. Given problems, we sometimes don't have answers. But just to see how they think through it.
That's hard.
But it's not a trick. They know that's coming. They're challenged in ways that require them to work together. And through life, that's true too. You can't solve everything on your own.
President, today I finally had this chance to ask you a very special tradition, which I don't believe for a long time. I heard that in Caltech, professor will allow students to bring their tests back, and even they finish at home.
Right.
That's so unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say
where did the tradition come from?
So it's not only that they allow them to, that's the expectation. There are very few exams given in class. And it's part of Caltech, which is the honor code. And it's an expectation. And it works remarkably well. I mean, you might not think, well, but again, it's a cultural aspect. It's also we're small. And so everybody is imbued with this sort of idealism about what learning should be about. But students, in fact, so on a take-home exam, they're given a certain amount of time to do it, but of course you're not there. And sometimes they'll be in the middle of the problem and they haven't finished it. So what they're supposed to do and what they do is they draw a line saying my time is up, and then they can continue working on it and finish it, and then it's up to the faculty member whether they want to count that or not. But it's really the responsibility of the student to be able to testify to what they've done. And I think part of it reflects also we know that Caltech's a difficult place. We give them problems that sometimes don't have answers. But just to see how they think through it.
That's hard.
But it's not a trick. They know that's coming. But they're challenged in ways that require them to work together. And through life, that's true too. You can't solve everything on your own. And so part of the honor code as well is your responsibility to work together on problem sets and learn from your peers. And we create an open environment where we would like to see them not competing against each other, but collaborating with each other in that way. And I think the honor code contributes to that. And it works most of the time. So it's actually an unusual and very fine part of the Caltech society.
Save your energy competing with MIT.
Yes, that's right.
Near the end of this interview, President, there is another very interesting tradition. I heard about Caltech. May I ask you? I heard that every Halloween,
Yes.
you will hold a Millikan pumpkin drop experiment. I heard it's famous. What exactly is it?
Well, you'll have to come and watch it on October 31st. So the tallest building on campus is Millikan and Millikan Library of campus. It's 10 stories high. And on Halloween, the students get on the top and they drop a pumpkin, as you can gather. Now, the idea is that it's a scientific experiment in a certain way. It's entertainment, but it's also a scientific experiment. So, of course, Galileo very famously climbed to the top of the Tower of Pisa and dropped 2 balls of different masses to show that they fell at the same rate. So we don't quite do that, but we take a big pumpkin, it's Halloween, and we put it, or the students put it in liquid nitrogen, so that it gets very hard, so it's going to splinter into 1,000,000 pieces, and it drops down, so you watch the drop, it hits the concrete at the bottom, it splatters, and if things are pushed, if sugar molecules are pushed really hard, there's something called Triboluminescence, which is that they give out sparks of light. And so that I don't think anybody's ever seen it give sparks of light, but in principle, that's the experiment that's being done. But really, the campus, well, we protect the students so they don't fall off the top of the building, and we clear the area. But a lot of people come out to watch this, and it's become an annual tradition, and it's part of the tradition of pranks at Caltech as well, where students are supposed to be clever and ingenious in terms of using their scientific skills for general entertainment.
Another unforgettable part of Caltech students' college life.
Yes, that's right, exactly.
Would you please share with all of our audience again today? My last question, what words do you live by?
Oh, that's very nice. So you're right. When I was first interviewed to come to Caltech, I talked about this, and it comes from my Jewish background, where there's a saying that you should have 2 pockets, and in one pocket you need to put the words, "For me, the world was created," and in the other pocket you put the words, "I am but dust and ashes." And the trick in going through life is to know when to pull which saying out of your pocket. And I find that very powerful.
Thank you, President.
Well,
thank you so
very
much for bringing us these fruitful thoughts for all of our audience. Wishing you and the Caltech stay cool.
Okay.
Remain prosperous and benefit the world through generations. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.